Hey everybody, welcome back to Onstage, Offstage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 185, December 2024. Our guest this month is Donald Loftus, a playwright and lyricist whose work has been performed around the globe and one of the masterminds behind the online play reading group New York Pages. Donald's play Joey is the last of our 2024 Missing Home series, and we present it to you now. Please make sure you stick around for our interview with Donald immediately following. Joey by Donald Loftus.
If you cross our border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you as required by law.
What good does it do to bring into our country somebody who's illiterate in their own country? Somebody who has no skills, somebody who's going to struggle in our country and not be successful? That is not what a good nation should do. And we need to get away from it.
There is no question that separating children from their parents can result in significant traumatic psychological injury to the children. Simply put, taking children away from their mothers is harmful to them. There's nothing complicated about it.
U.S. officials separated somewhere between 1,425 and 1,720 children. U.S. officials separated 2,047 children. Officials separated 2,550 children. U.S. officials separated less than 3,000 children from their families at the U.S.-Mexican border between April 19th and May 31st, 2018. Less than 3,000.
It was a long time ago. I try not to, but sometimes I can't stop myself, no matter how hard I try. I can't help myself from wondering what she was like. And in my wondering, I think to myself that maybe, and I can't be sure about this, but maybe she had a face like an angel. Yes. And I think to myself, yes, I think she might have had a peaceful and gentle face, like the beautiful fading angels in the ancient oil paintings that hang up high in the main chapel of my church. And then although I try not to, I wonder about her eyes, and I think that maybe her eyes were big and brown and caring. Maybe she had bright and loving eyes, but then, as I think more about it, I wonder if maybe her eyes were sad, or scared, or both.
There's incredibly strong science and a big hunk of common sense that both lead us to the same conclusions. Taking children away from their mothers is harmful to them.
The children often experience what is known as toxic stress. It comes from an intense, repetitive, or prolonged hardship or danger without an adult's intervention. Well, it's the same as is seen when a child is placed in an orphanage or survives a natural disaster, or lives in poverty, or in a war zone, or in a refugee camp. This kind of stress can have a lifelong impact.
When humans, or animals for that matter, feel threatened, the brain sets off an alarm. The heart races, the muscles contract, the breathing quickens, and the blood pressure rises. The brain's alarm prepares the body for how to handle the pending trauma.
This happens when a child cries because he is hungry. In a stable environment, a familiar adult calms them down. Their heartbeat slows, they can take a deep breath and relax. But for the nearly 3,000 children removed from their parents and held in custody, in cages, along the U.S.-Mexico border, the adult who could have flipped that off switch wasn't there. They were not there.
And I wonder to myself, did her sad brown eyes, did they glisten in the bright moonlight? Did they maybe glisten from the tears that must have been there? I don't know. And I can't know for sure, but I'll bet her smell was warm and sweet, like chocolates, or maybe she smelled pretty and delicate, like the wildflower smell. I'll bet her breath was cool and fresh like candy canes. I'll bet her skin was smooth like silk ribbons on a birthday present. I'll bet her voice was kind. I'll bet her hair was soft like a kitten. I can't remember, but I think her arms were strong. Yes, I bet her arms were strong, but also tender and loving. I think I can remember her strong, tender arms reaching out for something, reaching out for me. But I don't know. Not for sure.
The staff at these refugee camps are not to touch children. If a child is crying, weeping for their mother, the staff can only offer a toy or a book to console them. They are not allowed to hold them.
The trauma that these children go through has biological consequences. Consequences that can last a lifetime.
There is not one study that tells us separating children from their families is bad for their brains and development. There are hundreds of studies produced over several decades.
Some believe that a toddler who experiences trauma won't remember the fear and anxiety once he's placed into a stable environment, like a foster home. But that is absolutely wrong. While the stress may seem more subtle than a broken bone, it can leave permanent marks on a child's brain, and it can create a weak foundation for later learning, behavior, and health.
I try not to, but sometimes I can't stop myself from wondering why she didn't fight. Wondering why she didn't try. Wondering why she didn't care. And sometimes, or rather most times, even though I know I shouldn't, I wonder if she is wondering about me. Does she wonder what I'm like? Does she wonder if I care? Does she wonder if I'm wondering about her? I can only wonder. I can only guess. I can never know.
If you break into my house, you're going to jail. And your kids are not going to go with you.
The best way to describe the centers would be to liken them to summer camp. 24/7, food, water, and some have other services. Some even have basketball courts, soccer fields.
Something had to be done. We are a laughingstock. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending the best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they're telling us what we are getting.
I know it would be better, healthier. I know I would be happier if I could just stop wondering. They all tell me that I should. They all insist that I should.
If you cross our border unlawfully, if you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you as required by law.
None of them understand that I just can't. I can't stop wondering what he's like now that he's grown. I never can stop wondering.
Simply put, taking kids away from their mothers is harmful to them both. There's nothing complicated about it.
I know that I must try to stop spending my days and nights worrying and wishing and hoping and praying. But this is what I do. This is what I must do. I must wish that he is happy. I must hope that he's healthy. I must pray that after all that has happened, I must pray that he is now better off than he would have been. If we'd never tried.
Your heart races, your muscles contract, your breathing quickens. Your brain is preparing the body.
And I think to myself, maybe his eyes glisten. Maybe his legs are strong. Maybe he is tall. I try to picture him as he plays and laughs and runs. Maybe his hair is curly. I know I shouldn't, but I can't stop myself from wondering. Does he know that I tried to fight? Does he know how I tried to keep him with me? Does he know how it broke me apart? Does he know I am broken?
And they are not allowed to touch the children. They are not allowed to hold them.
And sometimes, or rather most times, even though I know I shouldn't, I wonder if he is wondering about me. Does he wonder what I'm like? Does he wonder if I care? Does he wonder if I'm wondering about him? They tell me to try not to think of it. They tell me it does no good. No good for nobody. Even if I ever tried not to think about it, I would continue to think about it always. I think that maybe someday I may see him again. I think that someday, but I don't know. Not for sure.
I'm not to discuss it. I'm not really even to know. They didn't want me to know that she was taken away from me before I could walk. That she was taken away from me before I could know her. Taken away from me before I could tell her I loved her. Before she could tell me... They took her away from me, and now I'll never know what she was like. I'll never know what she was thinking, what she is wondering. They took her away from me before I knew anything. But now I do know. Now I do know that I'll never really know. I do know I can't ever know. I try not to think about it. Ever. But instead, I think about it always. I always have. I always do. I think maybe when I turn 10, I won't. But I don't know. Not for sure.
That was Joey by Donald Loftus, featuring Meg Elliott, Sean Kimber, Ryan Kimber, AJ Sage, Katie Spallone, and Maura Stevens. When I originally sent out the call for plays for our Missing Home series, I knew I was going to be getting a lot of plays that definitely pulled at your heart, but I don't think there were not many that pulled as hard as yours did. And the first time I read it, I had to put it down and walk away for a couple of minutes because I had things to process. But I came back to it and I actually debated whether or not to include it because it was I was questioning whether or not I could do justice to it, and then I thought, no, this play really needs to be heard. So we're going to go for it. But I'd like to know, do you recall the circumstances that prompted you to write this?
Well, it was just all that was going on with the mass deportation and separating families and so on and so forth. And since I was retired, I watch a lot more news than I ever did, and it just really consumed me. And I'm reading all these sort of cold reports and quotes from politicians and city officials and so on and so forth. And I'm thinking, what is the person who's going through this feeling? What is the child whose mother has been taken from him? Or what is the mother whose child has been separated from her? What are they thinking? What's going through their mind? And does this ever get resolved? So when I wrote it, I used a lot of quotes from the newspaper at that time that were from these officials who were doing this sort of thing. So a lot of the quotes are direct, and then I just imagined what it'd be like for these, for Joey and his mother to live through this. It's very sad because I think we're about to go through it again. I was hoping that it was going to get better, but based on what's the promise of the new election,
Yeah,
it looks like it's even going to be worse. So
I think things are probably going to be exponentially worse because now they've
yeah,
had time to prepare for another 4 years.
yeah.
I was shocked, just worse than shocked when I heard about what was going on, separating the parents and the children, and I thought,
Hmm.
this is not my country.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
This is not my country, and yet this is my country doing it. How
And
long did it?
what I did, which is a little strange in it, is that he can be Joey, the little boy, or
Yeah,
can be of any age, and the mother can be of any. This could have happened yesterday. This could have happened 4 years ago. This could be 10 years in the future. It doesn't change the impact that this would have had on human beings for their entire life. And it's been done when it was first done in Boston. The man playing Joey was probably 50.
yeah,
And then it's also been played by little boys. So, I think it's such a terrifying but universal, not universal, certainly a U.S. Situation that it can really apply to a number of different people.
sure. And Joey gives you the capability of being so many different people. Because Joey could be male, Joey could be female.
Sure,
As
absolutely.
you said, 6 years old, 50 years old. There are so many Joeys out there. I'm not even sure how to finish that particular sentence, but
Yeah.
the horror of it is doesn't leave. The way you've woven in all of these different speakers, all these four speakers and Sarah and Joey, the way they all come together paint a picture that you cannot take your eyes away from, but it wrecks you inside when you actually think about this reflecting reality.
I think, some of it, I hadn't thought of this until this very moment, but my father was taken away from his mother as an infant for child neglect. We don't really know the reason, what it was, and he was bounced, this is during the Depression, he was bounced from foster home to foster home. And back then, families took in these children because the government gave them money. And
Yeah,
they had the
yeah,
Depression and they needed the money and whatever. But he basically, I mean, and I used to think as a kid, I used to think what that must have been like, to not know who your mother was and not, and just get bounced around like you're a piece of property or a piece of garbage even. And as a playwright, I think it's so important. And when I go to see plays as an audience member, the impact that the adults in our life, and usually our parents, have
yeah,
on us as children affects our entire life.
sure,
And I'm
yeah.
always sort of like, I have two sisters. The three of us could not be more different. All three of us are completely different. We both have the same upbringing, but the impact that our family had on us, really shaped our lives and affects us, even to today.
What's the audience reaction like to Joey?
So as a playwright, I remember the first time I sat in an audience and saw one of my plays being produced. It's like being an expectant father. I mean, you're like, what's going to happen? What's going to be the reaction? And when a joke would come and they'd laugh, I felt good about it. And when they didn't laugh,
Mhm.
I felt bad about it. And what I loved most was making them cry. We did a musical version of Pollyanna, and there was a grown man who I knew he was actually a psychiatrist, and he was sobbing at the end of it. I'm like, yes. So the first production of Joey was in Boston, and we went to see it. And again, the audience at the end, they were like crying pretty heavily. And it's great. It's not like, oh, good, I made them cry, but it is like I touched them. I made them feel something. One time I heard Harold Prince say that when he goes to the theater, he doesn't go necessarily to laugh because he's got a funny wife and kids. He wants to be a different person when he leaves the theater than he was when he walked in the door. And I feel that if you as a playwright, you don't have to make them cry, but if you make them feel something so that when they leave the theater, they're thinking a new way, or at least for a moment thinking differently about a subject than they never thought before, you succeeded. That's really powerful. So depending on the production, it's gotten different reactions, but always very moved. Even in the most conservative neighborhoods where it's been produced, you can't. People are people. They have to.
Yeah.
They have to.
I think when people are confronted with something horrific in the abstract, it doesn't bother them. But when they're confronted with it within their space, it's a completely different story. And I totally agree with you about theater. I think I'd like my work to change somebody's status quo just a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't need to convert anybody to anything.
One person, you've done your job.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to make somebody think. I'd like to make somebody just walk away with another image, another something in their life that changes them just a little bit. So Joey is hugely impactful. How different is it from, the rest of your work is a little bit lighter generally, isn't it?
It varies. Actually, growing up, I was a huge Stephen King fan. And
you and me both.
And I wrote a play called Pear. I used to do this thing on Facebook called Obscure Facts of the Day. And it was, things that happened this day that we're probably unaware of through history. Right. And I had several different sources for it. I had a Broadway thing, I had a Hollywood thing. And one of my websites, not my website, but a website that I used was called Executed This Day. And it was people on, November 23rd who were executed in, 1801 kind of thing. And there was this story about this woman who was beheaded. She was the last beheading in Norway, I think it was. And she and her son murdered his wife. And it was this whole story. And with newspaper articles from the time, it was like 1880 or something. He went into an insane asylum and she was beheaded. She was the last beheading there. I wrote this play called Pear, and it takes place in an asylum. Pear is trying to work through it all, but each night is haunted by the ghosts of his mother and his dead wife. So it's like a horror thing. It's like a Stephen King kind of thing. It was just produced in Tampa. I got a 3-week run in Tampa. It was really exciting for me, and it was interesting. I don't only write crazy stuff like this. I've written a few musicals that are very upbeat. I find it hard to write comedy. I find that's the hardest for me to write. Although I enjoy comedies myself, I'm really much better with drama. I wrote my other play that's done really, really well is called The Springvale Armadillo. And that too came out of the same Obscure Facts of the Day thing. It turns out that in America, back in the 30s, there was a huge epidemic of leprosy, which I'd never known about. And this woman was taken if the family, particularly a Southern family, in the Bible Belt, thought one of their relatives had it, they sent them away to this leproseum owned by the Carville family. Carville, the political. Anyway, it was his family.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so this poor girl was at 17, was taken away. She had a little mark on her shoulder. Now she's in her 80s, and leprosy's been curable for years. But when you arrived there, they changed your name and your identity, and nobody knew who you were. No relatives were allowed to visit or anything. You were just gone. You were just disappeared. So now it's decades later, and leprosy is no longer a thing. They want to sell the hospital to a shopping mall developer, but they've got like these 6 octogenarians there. They don't know what to do with them. And so the play is this reporter from the Boston Globe who I wrote this during the AIDS crisis, this photographer who's HIV positive and doesn't really know if he's going to get the disease or not, comes down to interview her, really to find out how did she survive this, not knowing if the disease was ever going to come and so on and so forth. And so again, it's very heavy. And it's it's sort of based on a true story. I really prefer writing those kind of things.
Did you say this was a musical or it is not a musical?
Oh, that is not a musical. That is not a
Okay,
musical.
all right, because I'm sitting here trying to think of different staging things.
Oh, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
But
okay.
I don't pick a musical.
How long have you been doing this playwriting thing?
When I was in seventh grade, I was a lavatory guard, which was a thing, and my two best friends, Mark and
Lavatory guard?
Donald, were my co-lavatory guards. Mark ended up writing Hairspray, and Steve ended up being David Letterman's head writer for like 20 years or so more. They were identical twins, geniuses.
That must have been some lavatory.
Our job was just to let, we're allowed to let, six boys in at a time and, and that sort of thing. And so Mark and I used to write plays all the way through junior high and high school. And then he got a fully paid scholarship to Harvard and I didn't. And his brother, the twin brother, also got a fully paid scholarship to Harvard. They were just little boy geniuses. In ninth grade, they rewrote the American history book because there were so many errors in it, and they wanted to correct it. I mean, just crazy people. So anyway, Mark ended up writing Hairspray and won Tony Awards, but we used to write together all the time. And then, as I was told you once before, in my career, then I continued to write. I've not stopped writing since junior high school, but I would put them. Because I had a career, I put them in a drawer, the plays in a drawer. And then when I retired 5 years ago, I got very, very aggressive about sending them out, rewriting them and, re-editing them and so on and so forth and sending them out. And I've been really lucky. I mean, I've had a lot produced, much more than I would have ever dreamed of. And it's been really fun. In addition to that, through my real career.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did you do in real life?
I started in retailing and worked for the May Company in Cleveland, which is where I was born, and eventually was hired by Estee Lauder to manage their New England business. I was a children's wear buyer, and then back then, they didn't know how strong women were in business. And they thought that the cosmetic industry, because of Charles Revson and people like him, they thought it was like mafia, that only men could possibly be cosmetic buyers, which was so ridiculous. And when I was a kids wear buyer, and they said something happened to our cosmetic buyer, they're like, "It's between you and the garden shop guy, and we really want you to do this." I'm like, you know what? I have no interest in this. I don't know anything about it or whatever. And they said, "No, you have to do it." So I did it. Estee Lauder hired me, moved me to Boston, which I loved, and I ran New England. And then someone left. One of the executives left Estee Lauder and went to Yves Saint Laurent, which was owned by Yves Saint Laurent at the time. And then a year after she left, she called me and said, "I'd like you to come and be my vice president of sales," and moved to New York, which was always my dream. So we moved to New York. I eventually became president of Yves Saint Laurent. Then it was sold to Sanofi, the French pharmaceutical company, which owned a ton of brands. I became president of that. Then they sold us to Gucci. Gucci sold us, and eventually I ended up at Procter and Gamble.
Wow.
And I was the president of what they called their prestige division. We had like Dolce & Gabbana, Jason Wu, Van Cleef & Arpels, Versace. We had, a ton of brands. It's really great. And in that, when you're president of a company like that, you get honored a lot. And it's not because you're so fabulous. It's because you can sell a lot of tables to their
Sure,
journalists,
yeah.
because of magazines and whatever. And I was honored by the Dramatists Guild Foundation. And then I was just fascinated with this group. So I eventually, and they support playwrights. They basically support writers. That's their goal. And they help them a lot. So I eventually joined the board of that. I've been on their board for like 12 years or so. Through that whole time, which was crazy, when you're the president of a company, the company's really counting on you. And they want to make sure that you're dedicated and determined and focused. And if I was out writing plays and and doing community theater, I just thought they're going to think,
yeah.
No, I didn't. I didn't do it. And what's funny is that since I've been retired, I work as hard, maybe even harder, for a lot less money as a playwright, as I did as a business person.
Well, that's true. Nobody knows how hard this business really is. It's
very hard. I mean, I've been working for the past 2 days. I'm working on a musical submission to this. It's a very important group that produces new works. Their whole purpose is they're dedicated to producing new musicals. This thing has taken me forever to submit because every file, every song has a separate file, it has to be labeled a certain way, and blah blah blah. It's a lot of work, and it's funny because I have two playwriting group that I belong to. My fellow playwrights are like, "Wow, you can produce so much more than I do." I'm like, "Well, how many submissions have you made?" And they're like, "Well, probably like, I don't know, 12." this year. I'm like, okay, I did 12 before I got out of bed this morning. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you gotta go after it. And the poor theaters, they can get 1,200 submissions.
Inundated. Yes. Yeah.
They're picking 8, or
Well,
6.
I just saw a post from one of those theaters that said, "Listen, we've been getting a ton of submissions, and we're not even through them yet. Right now, we just got rid of close to 20% because nobody followed the rules.
Yeah, you have to follow.
Nobody paid it.
That's the problem.
This is
They
work. This is
it's
an unpaid job.
absolutely it's a pity because it is so financially unproductive because I'd love to hire somebody to do it for me. It takes
Yeah,
so much time. And you're
it
right.
does.
They're very, very specific about what they want. Most
Hmm.
people ignore that. Even the formatting of a play, the script itself is very specific. And if they see that you haven't indented your stage directions or they're not in italics, they will throw your script out. They won't even
Exactly.
check if it's worthwhile. I mean, you've got to be so careful, and it's a lot of work. It would be much less exciting if I never got produced. I've had plays done in India and Ireland and
Yeah,
England.
nice.
So it's and so that's like a dream come true for me. And again, if you're doing it for the money, forget about it.
I know from the submissions I got for this series for Missing Home that I got rid of at least 25% of what came in because I'm not going to read a badly formatted play. I'm
Yeah.
not going to read a play that's 20 pages when I asked for 10. I'm not, you get 200 plays, close to 200 plays like I did, and you're looking for excuses to go flip.
And these literary departments, they do that all day long. Like it's a Public or Manhattan Theater Club or what it might be. There are teams of people who just that's all they do, and they don't have
Yes.
time for nonsense. You either do it right or you're an amateur, and that's what they don't want.
If you're
So
not going to pay attention to the requirements, how close are you going to pay attention to your actual script?
right, right.
Exactly. I just want to run one couple of things by you. I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show before who said, as just throwing it off the cuff, I ran New England. That just opens up different things, and I might actually run with that later. I don't know. You and I know each other through New York Pages. You seem to be the person who just runs the show every single Tuesday.
Yeah.
Are you one of the originators? How did you and Pages come
Yeah,
into
so
the world?
there was a thing called Times Square Playwrights, and I was a part of it for about a decade. It was run by another person, and suddenly, and I shouldn't, and he unfortunately he's passed away, but he got into a issue with with a playwright who actually helped him a lot. Like Martin is for me,
Yeah,
my assistant. This person was for him, and he got really nasty and threw her out of the group. And we all
we're
were
talking
sort of,
Martin Pfeffercorn.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So he threw her out of the group, and we felt horrible because we knew how hard she worked and so on and so forth. We said, you know what? We're going to support you. We're going to start a new group. Some stayed with the old guy. And this was pre-COVID. So we were live, and she and I sort of ran it. And I don't know why I got stuck running it, but it was my first choice. And
Well,
then
you
when
ran every perfume company
that's
in
true,
the,
I
you
guess.
know.
When COVID came, we went on Zoom. So we started with like 30 or 40 people in the group. We now have over 300 members. And because
Yeah.
of Zoom, we have people in Italy and New Zealand and lots of people in California. We have you. It's a very diverse group. And I'll tell you, over the time, and we go on Zoom every Tuesday night from 6 to 10. We go live once a month in New York City. It's the quality of both the actors and the writing has gotten so much better. And I mean, the individuals who have been with us since the start
Yeah.
have learned and grown. I mean, I feel like my writing's better than it was before we started this group because you hear your scenes out loud. The actors range from like outstanding, from good to really outstanding.
Yeah.
We have a lot of equity actors that are with us as well. It's also great. So it's great for development for the actor and the playwright, but it's also great for relationships and meeting new people. And
Yes.
when I've done equity stage readings or whatever in New York, I use a lot of these actors from Pages that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good. Then I also belong to a group on Wednesdays, which is I'm by far the dumbest one in the group. They're all like PhDs and Ivy League professors and whatever. And there's only 12. There are 12 writers, and we actually read each other's plays. There's no actors. We actually do the acting. It's interesting because I can take a play on Tuesday night and have it read and get some reaction from the crowd. And I take it to this 12-person thing on Wednesday. It's completely different, which is, I think, important because that's what's going to happen in your audience. You're going to have somebody love it, some hate it. Yeah, it's a good learning experience. I think that for all, I was just having this conversation yesterday with a young composer. It's really important that you don't sit alone in your room and just write. You need to go out and you need to be in these groups and you need to meet people and make relationships and so on. It's all connections and so on.
Theater is collaborative.
Being on the board of the Dramatists Guild, I've met, on the board with me, like Pulitzer Prize winning playwrights like Doug Wright. And it's exciting for me to talk to them and get their views and so on and so forth. Andrew Lipp was their president. He wrote a bunch of stuff. Addams Family Musical he wrote. It's one of the most produced plays across the country. You can learn a lot by talking to these people. So it's really important.
It's amazing. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Theater is wholly collaborative. Yes, we sit in a dark cave and we write, our first couple of drafts.
Yep.
But you've got to bring it out and you've got to have other people listen to it and you've got to get the other perspective. Otherwise, the play is not going to grow. You bring your play into these groups and you think, okay, it's good. And somebody will say it's great. And somebody will say, well, what about this? And you grow as a playwright. Your play grows as a piece. It's a win-win situation, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one last question, then I'll let you go. What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about becoming a playwright?
Again, I would say that make sure you have another financial source. Because
sorry,
that's probably it is just a great art to be involved in because first it allows you to be creative. I have this thing where when I look at my life, I'm in Act 2. So Act 1, you meet all the people, you have all the challenges, you figure out where your life's going, you try to overcome those challenges. And then the second half of your life, you sort of resolve it. And so that's what's happened to me with playwriting. This is like I'm using all my experiences from the past, and that a lot of that goes into my playwriting and my Act 2 here. It's a great release. It's a great way to meet people, and it keeps your brain going. It's challenging. Tennessee Williams rewrote plays that he already won the Pulitzer for. It's a never-ending. You could do this 24 hours a day. I can't think of anything that I've had that's more rewarding than to have an audience respond to a play, or to get even have a theater pick it up. I picked up my play for 3 weeks. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And working with them on it was just a great experience with the director and the cast and so on. And it's important that you, as a playwright, I think it's important that you leave yourself open to questions and recommendations and so on. And with this group in Tampa, they would say, I feel it's a little awkward, when I say such and such line. And I would either be able to explain to them what the actor should, or what the character should be feeling, or they would convince me that, they're right. This line needs to be changed.
Sure.
And I think you have to remain open to that. It is, as you said earlier, it's such a collaborative process. And you're right. You sit in the darkroom writing alone, but once you turn it over to a director, it's a real collaborative process. And it's a great experience.
That's the thing I love about theater the most. As a playwright, coming up with something that makes me giggle, makes me cry, just makes me realize that this is what, this is really what I should be doing.
Yeah.
But working with other people and watching this thing come about is there's nothing better. Nothing. Donald Loftus, this has been so much fun talking to you one-on-one. And thank you so much for being here, and especially for this amazing work, Joey, which these things only come along once in a blue moon, and I'm glad it came my way for this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, George.
Hey kids, thanks for listening to Onstage Offstage. Onstage Offstage is produced monthly, and all of our shows can be found at onstageoffstage.org and also on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoy what we do, please recommend us to your friends. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at OnOffStage. And if you are a theater artist with an upcoming project or interest, or know of someone in the theater world who'd make good chat, by all means, send us a note at onstageoffstagepodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Don't Worry, Be Frappy by the composer Max Dickinson. You can find a lot more of Max's magnificent music on SoundCloud. I'm George Sapio. Thanks once again for listening, and please be kind to those with whom we share this rock. And as always, happy theatering to all of you.